Hello guys and girls, Bored now back with you for my cult television reviews, and on this video I return to Sunnydale for my latest review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And this one is a biggie. It's going to be season 2 episode 3. It is called School Hard, which of course is a nice play on the title of Die Hard, the classic late 80s action movies. So already a classic pop culture reference in the title alone, and there's going to be a few more during the episodes. But this is a biggie because it's a real game changer, I think, in terms of the universe, the mythology of the show. It gets more into that, but also just because it introduces two really big characters, two really significant villains, especially one of them who's going to become a mainstay. And I think just how they stand out from the rest of the crowd at this point, and how they shake up the world, how they shake up the Whedonverse, is a really big thing moving forward. I am, of course, talking about Spike, and here's Spike for you, making a little cameo. And, of course, his girlfriend, Drusilla. So Spike played by James Masters, Drusilla by Juliet Landau, daughter of Martin Landau. And they make such an impact from the moment they walk on screen. They just have this extra layer to them, this extra sort of, in Spike's case, this sort of swagger, this confidence, this charisma, which they both have. But yeah, they just have these really distinct standout personalities. They feel like a threat. They feel like sort of fully rounded characters in a way, we just haven't had so far up to this point in the show with the vampires or with the main villains. And I think they're also characters that just took on an organic life of their own in a way. I think now Drusilla isn't in the show as much as Spike is moving forward. She does pop back here and now, and we sort of see her in flashbacks as well. But I think after this season, is kind of her big sort of appearance in the show. And then you do get some notable sort of appearances, but they're just like cameos here and there. Whereas Spike, they really do, after a certain point anyway, they really run with him and really grow him as a character and do different things. And obviously I'll get to that when I get to those episodes, those seasons. But it did grow organically, really. I think the intention with Spike in particular was that he would just be kind of a season, like, big bad sort of thing, and that he would be... then that would be his purpose. He would just serve that purpose, and eventually, they would sort of kill him off, or he would go away for good. But, things really took off. It was almost by accident. Then he just grew, and they could see how great he was, and the reaction was there from the audience as well. And that's something which kind of happened with TV, particularly in the 90s. And a little bit after that. I think before it was all so open and exposed online, and you had, so many different people talking about it, and so many people just reacting to it after the episode had aired. And so many different reviews now we see on YouTube. So it was a very different world back in, this is still 97. So really characters could get that organic sort of life there, and yeah, so that's kind of what I'm saying. That's what happened over time. They realised it was a very different sort of thing, and that this was a character that was worth keeping around, and Spike in particular feels like such a big part of the Buffyverse. But I'll get into the episode anyway, because it's another classic one where we see really Buffy trying to balance her school and her school home life with that with her duties of the Slayer, and so to sort of coincide with Spike coming to town and that new threat, and also this festival of St. Vitius, which we hear the annoying one talk about. To go along with all that, she also has a parent and teacher night coming up, and so it plays into that very real sort of anxiety where her mother Joyce is coming to the parent teacher night, and where so Buffy feels, I guess, assessed on two different ends. She feels assessed from obviously by her teacher, by Principal Snyder, but also by her mother. So it's almost like double the pressure, and because she's been in trouble recently, sort of through no fault of her own, but circumstances, then I think there is that kind of extra pressure to start picking up with her grades, to start behaving at school, stuff like that, just to impress the teachers and to impress her mother Joyce. So this is a big Buffy Joyce episode as well. You get some really big scenes, and we really see a growth in both of them over the course of the episodes, particularly Joyce. But I think that's another interesting thing about the episode, the way it does authority figures and the way it really builds those in the Buffyverse. So that's all very interesting. It's a really good episode. It's well, partly written by Joss Whedon as well. Him and David Greenwalt were the main writers on the episode. So quite a nice little team, and we do see a lot of, I guess you could say, Whedonisms, if you like, in the episode. So it sort of opens in Principal Snyder's office, and he's basically grilling both Buffy and this new character, let's say, Sheila. We haven't seen her before on the show, and they both have, in terms of like misbehaving and getting into trouble, they are kind of the two top offenders in the school. So they're in his office and he's sort of punishing them, and the way he's doing that is he's making them prepare the parent-student night, parent-teacher night, sorry. They have to set up the food, the drinks, they have to do the decorations, blah blah blah, all the trimmings. But yeah, there's some really funny lines in this scene with Snyder. He has some great lines throughout the episode. Armor Shimmerman on top of his game as always. But yeah, he's just applying this pressure. I mean, at one point he makes a crack about, well, you know, if you have any parents, and then to Buffy, if you have any teachers, I think the comment is. And I mean, we get this contrast with Sheila and Buffy, because Sheila's just like this rebel, this really, yeah, she just doesn't care. She doesn't put any effort into anything. She's just very rebellious and kind of counterculture. And she, you know, when Principal Snyder mentions like they could be suspended, Sheila actually enjoys that thing. It's like, oh yeah, good news. How is that a bad thing? She doesn't say that, but that's kind of the what she implies through her actions. Whereas it's interesting with Buffy, because obviously by being the Slayer and certain things she's had to deal with, she has become an outcast. She has become a sort of a rebel, at least in Snyder's eyes. But it's not through choice, and I mean, I'm sure there's a side to it she really enjoys, and she obviously likes the responsibility. But Buffy's in this awkward position where she can't really, you know, in an ideal world, she would sort of say, well, hey, but I'm doing it because of this. You know, she obviously can't do that because she has to keep her secret under wraps. And so in that way, she just has to take her lumps. And in a way, she plays up to it because it's more easier. So she doesn't enjoy playing up to the stereotype, whereas Sheila probably does. I think that's the sort of contrast. And Sheila's reaction when she hears that Buffy burnt down her old high school gym, which is pretty funny. She's like, "Oh, cool." It's pretty funny. So they almost bond over that, although Buffy isn't so enthusiastic. And a nice bit of mention of the past. But this is another good episode for Snyder because he is this sort of authority figure, this kind of non-demon antagonist. So he's constantly building up, barriers and tension, and becoming this antagonist towards Buffy, a very human one. So they have a very good back and forth, particularly throughout this series, actually. And we get some nice little Scooby moments outside the school. I really like Buffy and Willow's reactions to Sander, where he kind of says, "Oh, what could go wrong? It'll be fine." And they call him a jinx, and they say, "Yeah, no one ever thinks anything will go wrong until some idiot says that." And they're really giving it to him. It's a really funny scene. And I think he says the line again, and that's when we get the first of our ironic cuts, which is Spike. Because I think the line is something like Sander saying, who could want to cause trouble or something. And we cut to Spike and his iconic Sunnydale entrance, where he comes crashing through the Sunnydale welcome sign in his car. And he then stumbles out and says, "Welcome home." Or "Home Sweet Home," sorry for getting that wrong. "Home Sweet Home," Spike says. It's glorious. It's a dramatic entrance, because when you're first watching that at the time, you think, wow, who the hell is this? He just made one hell of an entrance. And it does get referred to again in a later season episode. So when Spike sort of returns to the show, he does a sort of a twist on that original entrance. So it's pretty fantastic, and it gets to show this episode off to a blast. And then we see him, wander into the annoying one's home base, and him and the other vampires, they're getting really hyped for this festival of St. Vitius. And again, Spike just walks in, and he's just full of charisma and energy, and he has presence, and he just has this swagger and this confidence. So throughout the episode, it really shows you how subversive and how counterculture and how against the norm Spike is compared to other vampires and demons. He very much marches to the sound of his own beat. He does things in a very non-traditional way, and I'll get into some examples, but he sort of storms in, and he has these fantastic lines about Woodstock, because one of the vampires says about Woodstock, "I was there." And then, Spike does this great speech about how he was at Woodstock and fed off a flower girl for something like, and then watched his arm, like his hand, floating for the next week or so, and that was so trippy. So great lines throughout the episode. But what he does, which is quite clever, is then he sort of gets the annoying one on his side. He kind of, says, "Well, I've killed a Slayer in the past, so and I'll help you. I'll take out this one. I'll take out Buffy." And that's obviously interesting that throughout the episodes they do things that build up Spike. His past builds him up as a character and builds him up as a threat. So that's what that's essentially doing, when we find out, oh, he's killed a Slayer in the past. As it's turned out, he's killed two. And so we get this whole monologue, and I think that's, again, a difference between Spike, where he just has this malevolent sort of evil about him, where he just brags and he sort of jokes and is really enjoying his past and his actions, and the fact that he actually. Whereas I think to a lot of other vampires, if they killed a Slayer, it would be, yeah, cool, but job done and move on, sort of thing. Spike really enjoys those memories. He really gets an extra sort of buzz out of it. So I think that's a different side to the character. So we're setting up this whole different brand of villain in Sunnydale. And that leads to Drew being introduced. And what's great about Drusilla's introduction is the fact that she gets her own music. She gets this hypnotic, dreamlike sort of music, which introduces this very fragile, vulnerable, but kind of creepy sort of music that she just wanders into. She just drifts in, and she's just full of this unnerving but playful sort of energy. She's like this. I know Mary Poppins has been like this most twisted sort of gothic sort of Mary Poppins type character, where there is this vulnerability to her. And she's unhinged, that's kind of her throughout the show. She's very unbalanced, unhinged, and she convinces you of that. But yeah, I think Juliet Lendale does a great job of bringing a vulnerability and humanity to it as well. But she's like James Marsters, she's just full of energy, and they have great chemistry from the moment they're on screen together. You believe in their relationship, you believe in their connection and their importance to each other. And I think that's part of the thing, even though these are bad guys. I mean, they're sort of cool bad guys for a start, but it's also the fact that you do sort of buy into their relationship, or at least I do, and you still, apart from the fact that obviously you are rooting for Buffy and her pals, I think with Spike and Drew, they do hook you into their world. They do seduce you into their sort of relationship and their dynamics. So it's always fantastic to see. It's a fascinating screen pairing, and he's so serious when he said to because she's really getting like nervous about the Slayer, and he says, I'll do it for you, love. I'll kill her. It's done. And he's so definite about it. And then we get the second ironic sort of cut of the episode, which is when Spike, sort of says, this Slayer, is she tough? And then it cuts to Buffy in her bedroom, and she's got like her sort of comb in her hair, and she's trying to like run it through it, and she's like, ow, ow. So nice little ironic cut from what Spike was saying in the last scene. And so we get some stuff back and forth with Buffy and Joyce. As I said, that's going to be a big thing. I mean, Joyce is one of these characters who people have mixed feelings about. Some people think she's really harsh and really over the top, and just so bad as a mother for Buffy. And some of that you can put down to single parent and some of the stuff she goes through and some of the, tension that Buffy has. But I think some of the comments early on in like the first 2 seasons, maybe 3 a little bit, they do seem unforgivable. They do seem just way harsh, and that she sometimes makes it a bit too much about her and kind of the impact on her. But I think Joyce does have good growth along the way, and I think they're a really good like mother-daughter screen pairing, and Joyce definitely does come around, and it works for the drama anyway, the way she is. But maybe in the early seasons they could have dialed that back a little bit. But Joyce does have good character growth, as most characters do on this show, or most of the sort of main cast. So yeah, this is a big episode for Joyce, which I'll get to at the end there. And I really like in school we get Buffy kind of again saying with Giles, I need to if I get through this weekend, then I'll make the Order of St. Vizius my top priority. And then we get another really cool bronze scene. And I think the whole music, again, it's really the step up in the quality of the music is really adding to this series and to the characters and everything out. But this is a really great bronze scene. Now, we get kind of a typically sort of nerdy sort of jumper wearing indie band sort of playing, and I kind of like them. Buffy is cracking the books at the bronze. She's trying to stay on top, but then Xander convinces her, to have a dance. So the three of them, Xander, Willow, Buffy, sort of have this dance, and they're enjoying themselves. And this is where the scene really takes on a life, because Spike just wanders into the bronze. He sort of targets Buffy, and he suspects he knows which one she is, but he's not too sure. But I really like what they do with the music and with the flow of the scene here, because we get a tracking shot of him just watching them from the side of the dance floor, and it sort of fades out like the band playing on stage, and we get this more sort of intense mood type music, and he's just watching them like a predator. It's really nicely done, nicely shot. But again, we see a good example of Spike being this more cerebral, this smart vampire thinking outside the box, because he does this little trick just to make sure then it is Buffy. So what he does is he kind of, within earshots of Buffy, he says, you better call the police or something. I think I saw a vampire out there. And it's maybe a little bit clunky. It's a little bit, weak, that. But even so, it serves a purpose, and Buffy obviously takes the bait and goes running outside. And that's Spike's way of making sure she's definitely the Slayer. And I do like the gag with Xander and the stake, because Buffy is like pounding this vampire outside. I think there's a couple of them because they're like Spike's vampires, so there's kind of this struggle. And as she's hitting one, she's like, a stake would be nice now. And Xander goes running back in. She's left her bag on the table. And so he's rummaging through it for a snake, and he pulls out like a sort of a tampon sort of thing, and says, "Oh God!" and then gets the steak. So nice little visual gag there with Xander sort of fumbling about. So all good stuff. I love this scene, and then we get the first proper like standoff meeting between Buffy and Spike. And I just love Buffy's "who the hell are you" sort of thing when Spike's sarcastically applauding her. And just their standoff sort of thing. He says, you'll know this Saturday. And she says, what's this Saturday? I think it's Saturday, even though it's like meant to be a parent-teacher night. But maybe that they have them at the weekends in the States, who knows? But anyway, says that's the day I'm gonna kill you. And she will, and it's actually quite clever because he doesn't say Spike, but one of the other vampires does, so that she sort of knows that his name is Spike. But it's I sort of like that. It's such a vague introduction. It's Spike again playing mind games and like a little tease, and then he's off, and he leaves a message. He sends her a message in a very simple sort of way. And then in the library next stage, Giles starts looking him up. We hear about him having the nickname William the Bloody, which kind of double meaning, something to do with like ramming his victims with rail spikes. But also later we hear about the bloody awful poetry as well, which was when he was a human, but I think that comes a bit later. We don't hear about that in this episode. But immediately it's building the stakes, building the threat of Spike, because Angel comes in, and because one of them says, he can't be that bad, and Angel's entrance line is he's worse. much worse. He will not stop till everyone in his path is dead. And I just love that from Angel. I just love that immediately he's putting them on alert. He's selling Spike's threat. And that's something else we find out because Angel knows him. Obviously, he's got this past with Spike. So immediately that has a good positivity for Angel as a character, because up till now he's been a bit hit and miss as a character. He's been a bit flat, certainly in the first season, but we're now building more to Angel, his mythology. We're getting more to his past because of the connection with Spike. So there's more intrigue, and it gives more of a purpose for Angel to be in the episode because he has this history with Spike. So it's all great stuff, and we again see some nice character growth with Cordelia in this episode because she's helping them whittle the stakes in the library, helping them get prepared for the big battle. But the fact that Spike actually picks this parent-teacher night, and he actually goes against the grain, he goes against the annoying one's wishes, because why wouldn't you? Again, it shows that he doesn't do it by tradition. He's gone after the Slayer and is doing his own plan. So we get to this night, and there's a brilliant moment with Willow actually and Cordelia when earlier Willow has tasted some lemonade that Buffy has prepared, and it turns out she hasn't put any lemons or any sugar in it, I think, to sweeten it up, and it's just really sour and disgusting, and Willow's face is really good. And there's some great little subtle moments of acting from Hannigan in this episode. But yeah, she when Cordelia's really stirring it up with Buffy and her mother and Snyder, Willow's like, Cordelia, have some lemonade. And that's kind of the gag that Cordelia doesn't know about the lemonade being sour. So I really like Willow using her intelligence and smarts to get one back over Cordy, a bit like in The Harvest with the deliver, on the computer. So some great stuff there, but we really build this kind of bottle scene type thing, this shutdown in the school with Spike and his villains, showing up and going after the Scoobies. So it's all compressed into the location. It has this sort of alien Die Hard type feel. It's really cool. It's really sort of quite claustrophobic and atmospheric. And they do some good stuff with the characters because they all sort of pair off. But again, we see some great stuff with Spike and his charisma and just his lines. He starts singing at one point, someone's in the ceiling when Buffy's going through the ceilings. And he starts, at one point he does a play on Jack and the Beanstalk, I smell the blood of a nice ripe gal. And again, there's this spark, there's this chemistry instantly between James Masters, Sarah Michelle Gellar, and you just get the impression these are two great foes meeting for the first time. And I think throughout the tension and the rivalry, there is this kind of love to hate them type thing with Buffy and Spike. There is a begrudging respect, I think, over time, but it sort of comes from this. But great chemistry back and forth, great dialogue and great energy, really good versus evil. It's all sort of here. But of course, one of the big sort of, it's not really a twist, but it is fitting for the themes of the episode because Buffy and Spike go at it, and Spike appears to be getting the upper hand. But Buffy is vulnerable, and of course it's her mother who comes along and saves her. It's Joyce. Joyce nails Spike, I think, with the handle of an axe sort of. And it's just great, she says, stay the hell, get the hell away from my daughter. And that's kind of a riff off the Aliens line, with Ripley and Newt. But it's great. It's thematic. It goes along with what we've seen in the episode because it's very personal, a mother and a daughter, and they've had this tension, so this is a great way to bring them back together. And Spike does back up, and I think he says the line "women," and I just love that line and the delivery. But yeah, he backs off to fight for another day, and Joyce, hugs Buffy, and they reunite, and it's beautiful stuff. But it does make sense. I mean, obviously, in some ways, it's a bit weird the fact that it's a mother, it's a human being. Well, Buffy's human, but it's weird that it's Joyce who saves the day. But thematically, it makes sense, and it just shows the love a mother has for a daughter. So there is something very human about it as well. So it's a great scene, and I really like the speech that Joyce gives to Buffy at the end, or near the end, when they're outside, because Buffy's worried because she's been kind of busted in the parent and teacher sort of meeting. But Joyce does this great speech. She just says, "I've seen and I've got a daughter." Because she says, I couldn't really care about that other stuff. I've got a daughter who thinks of others first in a crisis, who knows what to do, can take care of herself, and I'm going to sleep more easily at night knowing that. It's a beautiful scene. It's a beautiful line, and just cuts to the meat of it. And it's great. It shows Joyce, Joyce is actually pretty cool and understanding, but I really like that line and that scene. And we see the various things with the characters. So we see Xander, who actually escapes, wants to go and get Angel. And so again, we see him kind of putting aside his kind of differences with Angel. And they sort of work together. And they try this trick on Spike, which is Angel's idea. So Angel essentially pretends to be Angelus, which is the bad side of himself, the bad vampire, which we'll get more into in this season, of course. But he tries a trick on Spike where he pretends to have Xander captured, and that's Spike calls his bluff, and that's when we find out he Angel sired Spike. That's how Spike became a vampire. So they're using that word, sired. So that's introduced to the Buffyverse. So this is all significant stuff. And he actually uses it. You were my sire, man. You were my Yoda. It's great stuff. Another great pop culture reference. Which again makes sense. And I love Xander, because when he comes out, when they come out and they're together, it's kind of like, what's a sire anyway? And before that, he's kind of like, Angel is explaining the plan, and Xander's like, well, what would have happened if Spike had bit me? And then Angel's like, well, I would have known, and he would have brought it. But some great stuff with Xander and Angel, and I love the stuff with Willow and Cordelia. So they've gotten away, they're hiding in the toilet, and they don't know yet then, things are safe, and Spike has left. So they're still hiding, and it's funny, you see a different side to Cordelia because she's really frightened, and she starts praying, for comic effect sort of thing, but she's praying. And I really like, again, this is just how great Alison Hannigan is in these scenes, because she's just so undercut, she's just so understated, but she has these distinct little facial expressions that just sell everything. They sell how annoyed Cordelia is making her. So I like the fact that Cordelia is almost getting on her nerves sort of thing in this way. Cordelia is a burden, but in a different sort of way. But Hannigan, she's very, she undersells it, or underplays it, which is effective, but she also has these great dagger-like eyes when she's watched. And the great line is, of course, Cordelia praying to God, hey Willow, do you want anything? And Willow's like, yes, some aspirin. And Cordelia's like, oh, okay, some, and oh hey. love that. Some great stuff there in the toilet. And I do like Willow and Cordelia scenes. I think they have this unique dynamic every time they're on board. And it ends with a cool scene with Spike back and the annoying one where he finally gets rid of him. And Spike again dupes him. It's like this kind of, because they're pissed because he ruined the night of St. Vicious. And Spike's just like, and he starts by saying, about doing it again. He's like, what am I saying? I would do it exactly the same if I had to do it again, except and he grabs him and he puts him in this cage and just hoists him up. And before he says something like, we're going to have a little less talk around here and a little more fun. And he just delivers the line with so much relish and greeting and up to the ceiling. And of course, there's sunlight going through. So we sort of hear the annoying one dying off screen. Goodbye, annoying one. Bravo, Spike. Spike's in town. Spike has taken over the whole operation. And thank God for that. And him and Drew wander off again. The dreamlike music. Fantastic stuff. What a great debut for those two, and some great writing throughout the episode. I loved the Buffy Joyce moments. There's some good tension, some good individual character moments. I mean, even though people like Giles and Willow, Xander, they're not in it that much. They're not the centre stage for this episode, but I think everything they have to do, they do really well, and there's some good stuff with them. So it's a well-paced episode. It's the sort of episode where everyone has their own little thing, and it works very well. They really make the most of every little character, every little scene. It's really well written, and obviously an important turning point for the show as an episode. Probably Sheila's the only weakness, because her character's just there. Because at one point Spike captures her and turns her into a vampire, and then there's kind of that, because she then shows up at the school later and is gonna go after Buffy, but she's only really used for that. She feels a little bit flat. She doesn't really have much to do, and it feels like you could have lost her, and it would be no great loss to the episode. So that's probably the one small thing I would say. Besides that, it's a really great episode. Again, you can see the standard rising, and Spike's such a cool villain, such a great villain, as is Drew. So, as far as episode ratings, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. It's a really, really good episode. Really, really strong. And the standard is just getting better for Buffy as a show at this point. So, as far as rankings go, because I rank every episode in order, it's really easy this week, because I'm going to put it straight in at number 1. I think this is the best, the most standout episode of the show so far. Has a lot of my favourite lines, and of course Spike and Drew are just so impressive. They make such a difference to the world. They shake up the world. So it's going to the top above Prophecy Girl. That is my review of When She Was Bad. If you have any... When She Was Bad. School Hard. That's my review of School Hard. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you have any thoughts on the episode, on Spike and Drew, in general, where you would rank this episode, please let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you are new to the channel, if you want to hear more Buffy reviews and more similar type reviews. And I'll be back with another Buffy review soon, and next time it's going to be Inca Mummy Girl, episode 4 of the 2nd season. That should be up pretty soon, but thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.